The nationalisation of Triple J was really important because it worked concurrently with the Big Day Out going national. And that was really important because suddenly you had this travelling festival in January of every year. But Triple J made those bands on the festival famous, if you like, for lack of a better word. But it was also really important in connecting rural and regional kids in Australia to the capital cities, to kids in the capital city. So I remember listening to the Request Fest with Michael Tunn, mid-90s, and you know, some kid doing his homework in Wagga Wagga could relate to the other kid doing their homework in Bunbury. Suddenly kids were connected, and they were connected through music, and Triple J was making these Australian artists household names effectively. And I remember coming on board to Triple J in '96, and we went around with Unearthed, and we went to bumfuck nowhere places. And to see the influence that Triple J had in these tiny towns that had only ever had their one commercial radio station and their one ABC adult talkback station, to see the effect that it had had on these tiny little towns. Suddenly these kids were being spoken to, they were being included, they were finding their kind, they were hearing the soundtracks that were to dominate their youth. It was really special. I have this one memory of going to a house, again on an Unearthed, and this dad had his son who was a skateboarder and another son who was perhaps a gamer then, but certainly not like we know now. But he said, "You have no idea how influential Triple J has been for the well-being and the growth of my kids." He said they love the station so much that when they turn on their lights in their bedrooms, it flicks onto Triple J automatically on their radio. They had wired it up somehow so that every time they turned on their lights in the bedroom, Triple J came on. And you're going, oh my goodness, like this really floored me. I think why it was so important in Sydney is because Sydney didn't have that community radio culture so much as, say, Melbourne did. Adelaide had 3D radio, Brisbane had 4ZZZ, but I don't think in Sydney, or certainly they didn't have FBI then, and I'm not sure, you know, I know there was perhaps 2SER, but it wasn't on the same. Perhaps the groundswell of 2SER wasn't as big as, say, Triple R and PBS in Melbourne. So I think bands had to work harder all of a sudden in order to get played, because suddenly there was an outlet for them. And if they were good enough and their songs resonated, they could sell records and sell out shows.
It played a very, very important role in creating this ecosystem for independent bands and bands that weren't in the capital cities to be able to present their music. The downside was, yes, you didn't get your songs on Triple J. Is that fair? Of course not. If you're looking for justice and fairness, don't work in the arts. It's not there. So, you know, you take the risk. It's a risky business. Triple J was full of, you know, there's some big egos in there, which you would expect from on-air staff, and I guess that's part of being an engaging on-air personality, right? Is that sometimes having being full of yourself and having a big ego sort of makes you an appealing performer. I used to attend the music meetings where most of the on-air staff would attend. They were very interesting. The music was played blind, so you didn't know who it was from. And then there would be discussion around the song as to whether it fitted Triple J's branding, whether there was a place in within the programming for it. And, you know, sometimes the meetings would be quite cruel. And I think if some of the musicians who were supplying the music that was being heard in those meetings were flies on the wall, they would crawl away and hide under a rock forever. Because the critique was just sometimes absolutely brutal and would be there within the first 4 bars. And as a aspiring producer, I would think, well, the fuck up. let's get to the chorus, before we absolutely shred this artist's hard work.
Yeah, I was in those music meetings at Triple J when I was lucky enough to be in Sydney, or sometimes I'd be on the phone from Melbourne on speakerphone. They were pretty crazy. Arnold Frollos took no prisoners, but to his credit, I mean, he was the reason Triple J was so goddamn successful, because there was a method to his madness. And to be fair to him, he did take into account people's opinions, but at the end of the day, he had the say. But I just found that if I couldn't get one of my bands or songs that I absolutely love and adored on the airwaves, I'd just play it anyway. I mean, Triple J gave me the freedom as a DJ to play what I wanted to play. You know, I think it was 1 or 2 songs an hour. And that's how essentially I broke Eskimo Joe. They sent me a demo of Sweater and I started playing it on Super Request, and the song took off. Kids loved it. And, you know, when Joel saw me a couple of weeks ago, he said, you know, you're the reason why we are still around today, making music. So you could break something on air when you had those chances, but yes, were there a ton of egos? Fuck yes. Were there arguments? Hell yeah. It almost came to fistfights, but not quite. But yeah, they were intense. And you were always wondering which record company had done what favour in order to get something on air. Because there were some of the songs that should never been played. Like there were some bands that I would have on my playlist that were Australian that you're going, no one's going to buy this, no one's going to remember this song in 2 years' time. Why are we playing it? So I'd conveniently forget some of those, and some of the internationals as well. But I think that culture changed a lot once Richard Kingsmill came in. I think Richard did things differently. You know, he certainly doesn't have the ego of Arnold Frollos, nor should he. But I think that probably changed. And also, you've got to remember, there were really big personalities on air. Majorly big personalities. They were all homegrown names. They're all household names. The Sandman, Mikey, Helen Razor, Michael Tan, Costa Zulio, Francis Leach, Sarah McDonald. They were all really well-known names. I can still remember them all. Jim Trail, Richard Margison, Richard Kingsmill. Everyone was different and unique, and everyone had a personality on air. And I think, again, that was what was so appealing to Triple J. You'd tune in and you knew that DJ was completely different to the other DJ and would bring something completely different. So it was a really golden time for Triple J, I think.
Let's not forget Dr. Carl.
Oh, Dr. Carl, well, he's still around.